Jace and Rhaenyra had a really wild idea about how to get more dragons on their side after the death of Princess Rhaenys and Meleys, the Red Queen. They find themselves exceptionally vulnerable with Caraxes MIA with the rogue prince tripping his wig off in the Riverlands, and Meleys a smoking corpse being paraded through King's Landing. The Black Brain Trust idea? They've got more riderless dragons on Dragonstone, why not find some more riders for them? Brilliant. Unfortunately, they are out of adult Targaryens that could do the job except for Rhaena, who has proven to be a dragon squib thus far. So the two of them hatched a scheme to read all the family trees like an over-obsessive A Song of Ice and Fire nerd to try and find some Targaryen blood that fell far from the family pole, I guess? Tree would imply there's branches. And then offer these far-flung relatives with drops of dragon blood the chance at being dragon lords themselves. I have concerns about that strategy in terms of how you aim to control someone based on no connection other than a marriage a few generations ago, but sure, go for it, dudes. What I want to explore in this video is how that might exactly work, and who are these free agent dragons that are available. To start off with, let's unpack the assertion made by Jace and Rhaenyra that it could work. The common wisdom going back to Old Valyria is the ritualized incest dragon lords practice kept the bloodline pure by reinforcing some kind of genetic trait that either allows or greatly increases the odds of being able to tame a dragon. To keep it in the family, the Targaryens continued the practice in Westeros after fleeing Valyria, marrying brothers and sisters very often. However, there wasn't always a pair of siblings to marry to each other, and so the Targaryens made do by marrying the Velaryons. Reason for this being that the Velaryons also have roots in Valyria in the distant past, although not as dragon lords. Clearly, the Targaryens thought, close enough. And it seemed to be. They kept riding dragons and hatching new ones left and right despite diluting of the pure, perfect Dragon Lord bloodline. The idea of there being some kind of blood pact or blood magic tying to themselves to the dragons alone is referred to in Daemon's song to Vermithor in Season 1. From my voice, the fires have spoken and the price has been paid with blood magic, with words of flame with clear eyes, to bind the three to you I sing. However, since the reign of Paris and Alysanne the Good, the Targaryens have decided that having some branches on the family pole are necessary, and had many more marriages outside the Valyrian gene pool. Rhaenyra herself is part Arryn, Princess Rhaenys part Baratheon. Obviously we have the Hightowers, and with Rhaenyra came the Strongs. All the children of these marriages with dragon riding and dragon hatching, no problem, as Jace alludes to. So it seems that a pure bloodline is not as necessary to dragon riding as was thought, or even possibly not at all. And there's some logic there. If the amount of Valyrian blood isn't as important as thought, find some long-lost Targaryens and see if a dragon will have them. And that last part is very important. The dragon chooses the rider, not the other way around. In this episode, they drop some corroborating information just to make it clear if you weren't sure about Aemon's high-flying taming of Vhagar. We learned that Daemon wanted the Red Queen Meleys for himself, as Meleys was his mother Alyssa's dragon. Yes, that Alyssa. However, Meleys refused the prince and instead accepted his cousin Princess Rhaenys, much to Daemon's fury, making him quote-unquote settle for Caraxes. And much the same for Daemon's daughter Rhaena, who has apparently tried to tame the riderless dragons on Dragonstone, and none will accept her despite her undeniable Valyrian lineage and history of dragon riders in her family and ancestors. Let us not forget Aemon as well, who until he climbed on Vhagar's back was constantly trying to claim one of the dragons from the dragon pit to no avail. The dragon chooses the rider. With that in mind, and some lowered expectations on incest necessity, who are these dragons that are up for claiming by whoever Rhaenyra and Jace find in the history scrolls? Let's start off with the previously ridden dragons, or pre-owned dragons as they should be called. There's three of them: Vermithor, Silverwing, and Seasmoke. Going from largest to smallest, we start with Vermithor, the Bronze Fury. Vermithor is the second or third oldest dragon alive. We'll get to the why second or third later, and also the second largest. The Great Bronze and Tans dragon was hatched by none other than the late King Jaehaerys I, the Conciliator, in his cradle around 34 AC. The story goes that Jaehaerys' older sister Rhaena picked and placed Vermithor's eggs specifically for her little brother, and boy what a choice that was. Vermithor is a grower. By 48 AC, he's noted as being the third or fourth largest dragon alive, which is pretty impressive for such a young dragon, outstripping Silverwing and Rhaena's own Dreamfire considerably, becoming a formidable force for the young king. Jaehaerys went everywhere with Vermithor, from the Reach to the Vale to the north and everywhere in between, during his many progresses. We also learned recently in episode 1 that Vermithor journeyed to the wall and refused to cross it along with the dragon Silverwing. Just an interesting little piece of information. Jaehaerys' strategy on his progresses was to show up with a genial and thoughtful temperament while having the gigantic bronze dragon behind him as a show of intimidation, and to remind Westerosi lords that he's not just their king, but potentially their doom. Thankfully, Jaehaerys never had to turn his dragon on his own people or subjects during his very long life. Vermithor played his part as intimidation, though. We saw the great beast when Daemon sang the songs of his people within the dragon mound, humongous, with great swords for teeth, and a mouth that looks more like a rancor than a dragon, and definitely not friendly. When Daemon begins singing, the dragon erupts in dragon fire into the cavern and tries very, very hard to make Daemon afraid with his growls and gnashing teeth. The Bronze Fury indeed. The nickname is well earned. In an infamous meeting with Lord Rhaegar Baratheon, Jaehaerys used Vermithor as a threat to make a Harrenhal of Storm's End in the Stormlands if Rhaegar did not quit acting out. Vermithor has also seen battle, both times against the Dornish. During the Third Dornish War, Jaehaerys and Lord Rhaegar fought against the Vulture King and used the Bronze Fury to torch whatever sparse encampments and caves they could find in the Mountains of Dorne. In the Fourth Dornish War, Jaehaerys, along with his sons Aemon and Baelon on the dragons Vhagar and Craxes, gave the Dornish warships attacking the Stormlands the Daenerys treatment, burning the fleet and sailors alive. Fire and Blood uses the evocative image of 100 candles on the sea to describe the horrific mass slaughter. This gives Vermithor arguably the strongest war record among the riderless dragons, having seen combat against humans extensively. Vermithor wouldn't be spooked by arrows or scorpion bolts flying and is well used to ending human life should they challenge him. The downside is, this was quite a long time ago. The Third and Fourth Dornish Wars happened more than 50 years ago by the time of House of the Dragon, and Jaehaerys himself has been dead for around 30 years. Since the loss of his rider, Vermithor has abandoned King's Landing and slunk into the caves of Dragonstone, where he contents himself eating and napping all day like a true icon. Unlike many other dragons, he has refused all potential riders since then, and seeing his reaction to Daemon and his song is probably unkind to those who try. It may be Vermithor who almost killed Rhaena in her last attempt at taming a dragon. Of course, the one hole in Vermithor's record as a dragon meant for combat is that he never fought another dragon as far as we know, which will be a common theme. The only fight between dragons the realm has ever seen outside of Dragonstone is the battle beneath the God's Eye, when Maegor the Cruel used Balerion the Black Dread to kill his nephew and rival to the throne Aegon and his dragon Quicksilver. So if we're looking for a dragon that knows how to fight its own kind, like, I don't know, Vhagar, who has now fought and killed both dragons she faced, Edge probably is going to go to Vhagar. Otherwise, if you're looking for a huge hulking monster that will nuke people willingly while also making everyone run in terror at the sight of its enormous bronze wings, Vermithor is your guy. Dragon guy. Yeah. Next up, you can't mention Vermithor without mentioning his mate as far as dragons go, Silverwing. Silverwing is the third or fourth oldest dragon alive, and also about the same for her size. Silverwing was hatched in around 34 AC by Alysanne Targaryen, aka the Good Queen Alysanne. Same story as Vermithor and Jaehaerys. Her older sister Rhaena picked and gave Alysanne Silverwing's egg. It almost seems like Rhaena has a hint of destiny in her, like Helena, with how important those two hatchlings would become to the realm. Silverwing is named for her silvery color, clearly a name given to her by Alysanne, much like Shaggy Dog for Rickon Stark. Some of you can imagine a child naming a favorite pet. Silverwing is a smaller dragon than Vermithor and Vhagar, and has a very different temperament and reputation. She's known as a kind and gentle dragon. I mean, where Vermithor might rip your head off for disturbing his nap, Silverwing would probably shoo you away like a kindly grandmother. And part of this is a reflection of Queen Alysanne herself, who is well known in her life for trying very hard to improve the lives of her people, particularly women, and encouraging peace through diplomacy and marriage pacts rather than threats of fire. If Vermithor and Jaehaerys are the stick, Alysanne and Silverwing are the carrot. There's even an adorable story about her child Daella, who is afraid of everything in life, even cats after one scratched her. The line here is that the dragons terrified her, even Silverwing, showing that this kind and gentle nature is markedly different from all the rest of the dragons. Alysanne and Silverwing traveled extensively as well, although more often for pleasure and far more often than Jaehaerys and Vermithor. They're described as seeing everything they could, like dragony tourists. seeing the world from above the clouds, whereas Jaehaerys is described more as using Vermithor like Air Force One, ferrying him around to his political stops to campaign for Targaryen exceptionalism. Silverwing is also the dragon in Fire and Blood that wouldn't cross the wall, with Alysanne noting in a letter that was the only time Silverwing has ever disobeyed her. Silverwing is over and over depicted as a kind and gentle dragon by the standards of their species, however, she has also never taken another rider since Alysanne died in 100 AC. Silverwing and Vermithor are noted to act like partners just like their riders were in life, often sleeping together and hanging out in the Dragonmont. Almost like both dragons have been in mourning ever since losing their riders and refusing all attempts. Silverwing is probably going to be far more kind about rejecting riders than Vermithor would be, but she is still a dragon, so things could get quite burninating. As for history and combat, Silverwing has never been used in any kind of war or conflict. It's entirely possible in the dragon's long life it has never killed a human at all. And of course has never fought another dragon. It wouldn't even be in the nature of Silverwing to do so. As far as a dragon you'd want to try and tame, Silverwing is perceived as the easiest, being less cranky and murdery than all the others. Doesn't mean she wouldn't roast someone for trying though. There's also the problem of how effective Silverwing would really be anyway. Despite her immense size and her old age, she basically has no experience fighting against people or other dragons, which we saw does make a difference with Sunfire and Arax. Likely the safest to try and tame, possibly less effective in combat, however definitely the best dragon to chill with and rub their immense belly. Seasmoke is a dragon well known to the audience already, the former mount of Laenor Velaryon. Hatched by Laenor in his childhood, Seasmoke is a relatively young dragon and on the smaller side. Known for being pale silvery gray with golden orange wings and frills as well as piercing yellow gold eyes. Seasmoke doesn't get a lot of description on its personality, although its main traits would probably be bravery and loyalty. There's no danger Seasmoke will not brave if commanded to. We saw this on display in the War in the Steppe Zones, when Laenor routinely used Seasmoke to kill large amounts of Triarchy pirates, despite being under fire almost constantly. And again, Seasmoke has never seen dragon combat. The running theme continues. The most interesting thing about Seasmoke is that its former rider Laenor Velaryon is not actually dead, and Seasmoke seems quite upset about it. It's noted in the episodes that the dragon often flies over Driftmark and Spicetown crying out. As Mysaria notes, it might be out of loneliness. You could also read this behavior as Seasmoke trying to find Laenor again, like a very large and fire-breathing version of Seymour the dog from Futurama waiting to fry. Other than the heartbreaking nature of that description, this presents a problem lore-wise. There's never been a dragon who has had two riders before at the same time, nor a rider with two dragons. The bond seems to be one-to-one only, a bonding of soul to soul. So if Seasmoke is to take a new rider, one of two things must happen. Laenor must be dead abroad in Essos, freeing Seasmoke from the bond, or we must reevaluate what we know about the dragon bond. As far as mounting Seasmoke, the dragon has had no problems killing humans and has done so many times. It's unclear if anyone has tried to mount him since Laenor left, however it probably would not go well. There's no mention anywhere of Seasmoke being docile. Similar to Vermithor and Silverwing though, Seasmoke spent his whole life around people and receiving training from the Dragon Keepers, so the dragon wouldn't be as openly hostile as the wild dragons to anyone who approaches him. And this problem of a rider may solve itself anyway. We've seen extended shots of Seasmoke flying over Adam of Hull, one of Corlys Velaryon's bastard sons, and seemingly circling a young man. Perhaps Seasmoke without Laenor has chosen another member of the Velaryon family as his next rider, almost as like a proxy for Laenor.
Hey there, Joe from the future. Just popping in to say that yes, Adam has been aggressively claimed by Seasmoke, so this part doesn't make a lot of sense, but I wrote this before episode 6, so there you go.
Next up, we have the truly wild dragons. These are the dragons who have never had a rider and don't need no rider. They've had little to no training from the Dragon Keepers and are considered dangerous to approach at all due to their lack of familiarity with people. Like the pre-owned dragons, there's only 3 wild dragons, although that number may be lower than it should be thanks to one in particular, and we'll get to that violent dragon last. Let's start with the most shy boy dragon of them all, the Grey Ghost. Very little is known about the Grey Ghost outside of some basic information. No one knows how old the dragon is, nor what egg it came from, or even which dragon laid it. It wasn't a cradle egg like we often see with the Targaryen dragons. Its origins are entirely shrouded in mystery. The dragon is not particularly large and described as a pale white or gray color, the color of morning mist, and is most often seen skimming Blackwater Bay for sea life to snatch up and eat. And by most often, I mean almost never. The Grey Ghost name doesn't just come from its color like a dragon wearing a bedsheet. The dragon is almost never seen. Even for locals on Dragonstone who occasionally see all the dragons while they hunt and stretch their wings, there's often years between sightings of the Grey Ghost like some kind of scaly Bigfoot. But this dragon avoids human contact at all costs and hides on the far side of Dragonstone as far from the castle and villages as possible, and seems to be a master of the lava tunnels and caves of the volcano, disappearing into them to evade people with ease. Like a ghost. Get it? Obviously, the Grey Ghost has never had a rider. One would even have to find the dragon to have a chance at riding it. And also never seen combat, and seemingly no fights even among other dragons. The Grey Ghost lives an entirely solitary life, avoiding everything that it can, hiding out in the caves and tunnels. As far as taming goes, at least you can find the other dragons in their caves to try and jump on their backs before they kill you. Out of all the riderless dragons, the Grey Ghost would probably be the worst possible dragon to try and tame. Even if you could find it, it'd probably run and hide from you every other time and run from any other kind of combat. Basically just leave the little ghosty dragon alone. And second of the wild dragons, we have the Sheepstealer. You can tell these are wild dragons because they are not given cool Valyrian names, instead simple summaries of their behavior that you'll get from normal people trying to describe them. And following that, Sheepstealer's primary attribute is stealing sheep. Sheepstealer can never get enough sheep, and if there's a sheep anywhere near the dragon, it will find it and gorge itself on it. It's kind of odd to think of a dragon having a sweet tooth for mutton, but here we are. The dragon is well known across Blackwater Bay and the Crownlands for swooping down and snatching sheep from herds. Although its behavior is mostly sheep-focused, as no matter how much the shepherds protest, Sheepstealer has not killed any of them. Sheepdogs, though, have been known to go missing, presumably for getting a bit too aggressive in protecting their flocks from the dragon. Sheepstealer is a relatively large, mud-brown dragon, and an older one too, being hatched quote-unquote when the Old King was young. The Old King Jaehaerys being referred to here, and him being young is just vague enough that there is no clear age on the Sheepstealer. Presumably somewhere around Silverwing's age, perhaps younger, although Sheepstealer is notably nowhere near as large as Vermithor or Silverwing. The reason for this, other than dragon genetics, is that the dragons who are tamed and kept in the dragon pit are cared for by the dragon keepers in the royal family, with food being regularly delivered to them to allow for consistent growth over time. Wild dragons have a much more disorganized feeding pattern, and so despite similar ages, end up on the smaller side. I don't mean to give the wrong impression here. Sheepstealer is still a pretty large dragon, somewhere around the size of Meleys and Caraxes, but still smaller by quite a bit than its peers in Silverwing, Dreamfire, or Vermithor. Similar to Grey Ghost having no rider, Sheepstealer has never seen any combat against humans and seems to prefer it that way. Surely the dragon could have roasted annoying shepherds, and it doesn't seem to feel it's worth its effort. I would not mistake that for passivity though. There's no mention of Sheepstealer being a kind or docile dragon. You would still have to be very, very brave to approach this large dragon and attempt to tame it when it has never known a rider or really lived among humans. And as for dragon fighting, again, there's no record of Sheepstealer having any fights with its own kind, but it also lives on Dragonstone well away from an isolated cave, so I don't know, who really knows? And last on the list of wild dragons, the reason I was unsure about the relative size and ages of Vermithor and Silverwing among their peers. The Cannibal. Cannibal among all dragons is the most mysterious and confusing of them all, and the most aggressive. An enormous coal-black dragon with baleful green eyes being somewhere around the size of Vermithor and Silverwing. And as for that name, you may have been listening so far and wondering why there's so few unclaimed wild dragons on Dragonstone. We've seen there are a bunch of eggs being laid and there's a whole host of dragons that could be having them. What gives? What gives is the Cannibal. The Cannibal's favorite food is not fish or sheep, it is other dragons. It is well known to prey on hatchlings, smaller dragons, and eggs, as well as any dragon that dies of really any cause. Cannibal is also known to attack smaller dragons it comes across, both of these behaviors adding up to a severely diminished dragon population. The Cannibal is probably one reason the Targaryens started using the dragon pit as well as hatching eggs in cradles instead of on the Dragonmon itself. There was a good shot that a hatchling would be devoured by the Cannibal as soon as it was discovered, making the idea of raising the population over time particularly fraught. It's why there are so few truly wild dragons, as they get less protection from the dragon keepers and their riders when the Cannibal shows up hungry for dragon flesh. The age of the cannibal is also a mystery as presented in the text. It's gigantic enough that it should be near the age of Vermithor or Vhagar, however, no one knows when the coal black dragon was hatched or even where it came from. Rumors from the villagers on Dragonstone say the dragon isn't just kinda old, it is incredibly old, living on Dragonstone even before the Targaryens showed up in 114 BC from Valyria, which makes the cannibal more than 200 years old, by far the oldest dragon alive. In the text, that rumor is disputed by Munkin, Eustace, and Gildane, however, it is still presented to the reader as a possibility, and the age is also not disputed. And in all that time, no one has ever been idiotic enough to try and mount the dragon and live to tell about it. The Cannibal's Cave is littered with the bones of would-be dragon riders, almost displayed as grim trophies over the dragon's resistance to humans. As such, the cannibal has never seen combat against soldiers and armies, but it definitely has killed a lot of people, and it is the rare exception to the idea of dragons fighting. It is, by far, the most experienced dragon at killing its own kind, with untold numbers of dragons killed and eaten by it. Vhagar, with 2 kills, is a novice by comparison. Truly the greatest dragon slayer of them all. So in a way, the cannibal is the perfect dragon to want in a war of dragons. It would presumably win almost any fight against another dragon. Just good luck getting it not to kill you on sight when you approach it. The most interesting thing about the cannibal is its origins and its particular habit of killing other dragons. There's the possibility that the cannibal is basically like the Jack the Ripper of dragons, a psychopathic killer that just kind of enjoys killing its own kind for some reason. Maybe the cannibal is a hatchling of one of the early Targaryen dragons that came over from Valyria, including the young Balerion, and its origins lost over its extremely long life. However, if you take the rumors about it being on Dragonstone before even the Targaryens arrived seriously, begs a few questions. Where would it have even come from? The Targaryens brought dragons with them for the first time to Westeros, right? Well, that part is not as clear as you'd think. Macers have discovered dragon bones across Westeros in archaeological digs and burial sites, suggesting that there were dragons on Westeros in the long past. And there's stories going back to the Age of Heroes about the first men in early Andals battling dragons, like Serwyn of the Mirror Shield, who pricked the dragon Urax with its own reflection, or Sir Galadon of Morn, Davos the Dragon Slayer, and Old Crackbones, among others who supposedly made their mark in legend by killing dragons thousands of years before they supposedly arrived. It's possible that the cannibal is the last of these domestic dragons, its egg nestled away in the Dragonmont until it hatched alone on the volcanic island and was shocked to find out that there were other dragons when the Targaryens arrived. As Gurm said in a recent blog post, dragons are not nomadic, prefer to live in and around volcanoes almost exclusively, meaning if there were dragons once on Westeros, they probably would have lived on Dragonstone too. The cannibal's love of killing dragons is that maybe it doesn't recognize the Targaryen dragons as its own kind or its own species, and so attacks them like prey, like the Sheepstealer does with sheep, or out of a territorial nature, like you'll see among animals when they kill the young of their own species if they aren't of their own bloodline. Lions are infamous for this, with some males killing all the cubs once they take over a new pride. Another possibility comes from the construction of Dragonstone itself. You may not know this, but the Targaryens did not build the structures and castle on Dragonstone. They moved into a pre-existing Valyrian stronghold. 200 years before the doom of Valyria and the Targaryen migration, Valyrians colonized the island and built it up, intending to be an outpost of the Empire for trade, or knowing Valyria, slavery. It's been said the castle was not built with manpower, but Valyrian sorcery and magic. Afterwards, though, the Valyrians mysteriously abandoned this outpost and it sat unoccupied until the Targaryens took it over. Given that it was clearly chosen for the volcanic island's ability to attract and hatch dragons, it makes sense that there could have been an egg that was moved over from Valyria and left behind during this time. It could have even been made in secret, as by decree the Valyrians did not allow dragons to live or be hatched outside the home island of Valyria, jealously guarding their advantage over their own colonies. The cannibal, perhaps a leftover relic of these times, and the volcano's heat eventually hatching it. And our third possibility, the Velaryons. While I specifically mentioned the Velaryons were not dragon lords, they were well known as seafaring merchants and, as I heavily suspect, dabbled in piracy over the years, as it seems every seafaring power in the Narrow Sea does. They left Valyria long before the dragons and settled on Driftmark. Now this is for sheer speculation, but mayhaps they smuggled an egg or two out of Valyria with them, or purchased one, or stole it, and the family either lost control of them, or maybe were unable to hatch them. And as we know from the main books, fossilized eggs are not quite as dead as they seem, and perhaps that is the origin of the Cannibal, a long-lost Velaryon dragon that does not share bloodline with the Targaryens. And like with previous examples, the idea of a solitary dragon outside the Targaryen dragon bloodline would explain why the Cannibal attacks others on sight. Which origin of the Cannibal is true? A psychopathic ancient dragon with its origins lost to time? A descendant of a prehistoric dragon population on Westeros? An abandoned egg from a long-deserted Dragonstone outpost? Or maybe a secret Velaryon dragon? No one really knows. All we know is that the Cannibal is huge, angry, and has a love for killing any man or dragon who comes across it. One thing is for certain, the time of the sowing where the Blacks invite people with dubious Valyrian blood challenges the very idea that the Targaryens are gods above regular man. If all their blood purity and Valyrian magic is not actually necessary for taming dragons, maybe they can be overthrown like the boy and Hugh wonder as they watch Maelys' head being dragged through the streets of King's Landing. And what will these potential new Dragon Lords do once they are given the absolute power that dragons represent? As Otto Hightower said, the gods have not yet made a man who lacks the patience for absolute power. Rhaenyra and Jace are certainly about to test that in the biggest way possible, creating a scenario where even if they win the war, the Targaryen dynasty may suffer for generations from creating dragon riders they cannot possibly hope to control. One way or another, we're about to get a lot of answers about what exactly it takes to be a dragon rider. Is it blood, bravery, magical song lyrics, or maybe something else we don't yet know? Thanks for watching.